right, so I'm not a doctor, a neurologist, psychiatrist, psychologist, or any other kind of doctor for that matter. But I don't need to be one for the subject that I'm going to talk about today. And that subject is traumatic brain injury, TBI for short. This topic has many different parts to it, so it's going to take some time, but you might want to stick around and listen to this. If you're an inmate, were an inmate, or any type of correctional staff, you want to stick around and listen to this, especially if you're planning to file disability. And if you aren't planning to file disability, after this, you probably might want to file it. If I had all the info I have now, back when I first got out of jail, I would have definitely filed disability. However, there is a diagnosis though that has to be acquired. So hold on and let me get into it. TBI might explain how many inmates act how they do. And with a little understanding, correctional officers and staff can calm tensions among inmates down if they would just learn about this topic. TBI might explain why some inmates act how they do. And with a little understanding, correctional officers and other correctional staff can use this knowledge to ease tensions with inmates and calm inmates down. Many times, inmates are being unknowingly provoked, and it's not the correctional staff's fault. But you're going to hear all about this. So let me define TBI, all right? TBI is a brain injury that can range from mild to severe and affects how the brain functions. TBI can be caused from a number of things, and here is a list of some things that can cause TBI. A blow, a bump, or a jolt to the head. A sharp object piercing the brain. Falls, strikes to the head during sports. Motor vehicle crashes, assaults. Okay, so now that I've given you some causes of TBI, let me go ahead and give you some symptoms of it. If you recognize any to many of these symptoms I'm about to give you, then you more than likely have TBI. First, headache, nausea or vomiting, fatigue or drowsiness, problems with speech, dizziness or a loss of balance, blurred vision, ringing in the ears, a bad taste in the mouth, sudden changes in smell, and sensitivity to light and sound. Very importantly, TBI can increase the risk of mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression, as well as sleeping problems. Emergency care for moderate to severe TBI focuses on making sure the patient has enough oxygen and blood supply, maintaining blood pressure, and preventing further injury to the head or neck. Real fast, let me run off some of the sources of this information I'm giving you. The Mayo Clinic, the Institute of Neurology, Johns Hopkins Medicine, VA Mental Health, the CDC, and Virginia Public Health. Those are just a few sources if you want to go look it up for yourself. But TBI is a major cause of death and disability. In 2021 in the U.S., there were 69,000 TBI-related deaths, and that averages to 190 a day. So you can see it's very serious. The CDC has determined a specific classification of different groups that are more susceptible to getting TBI. One, we have racial and ethnic minorities, service members and vets, people who experience homelessness, people who are in correctional detention facilities, survivors of intimate partner violence, people living in rural areas. One of the reasons this is so relevant for inmates is because, like me, I was an inmate. Now, if you were to, think of how many times that you were in a fight and got hit in the head. I've got hit in the head so many times, and I've got scars. Like, my skin has been busted open on my head in fights inside of prison. People have hit me in the head with things. So, you know, that's one of the reasons that so many people in correctional facilities have it, because of violence like that we're subjected to. It could even be by correctional officers. A lot of inmates are beat by correctional officers. So that could do it too. All it takes is a blow to the head, kind of like a concussion or something. You know what I mean? Except for TBI follows a fine line to mental health problems. Another way TBI is defined is brain dysfunction caused by an outside force, usually a violent blow to the head. TBI does require a medical diagnosis from a doctor. Now, the way you should do this is to contact your primary care doctor, go see them, and have them refer you to a neurologist. Now, you really need a diagnosis, especially if you plan to collect disability. You will have to have that. With TBI, there's some things you might experience. I'm going to start with cognitive amnesia, inability to speak or understand language, mental confusion, difficulty concentrating, difficulty thinking or understanding, inability to create new memories, or inability to recognize common things. All right. When it comes to behavior, there's some differences you might notice. All right. Abnormal laughing or crying, aggression, impulsivity, irritability, lack of restraint, or persistent repetition of words or actions. You know, like some people will say, I got a job today. It's at Walmart. Then you see them over there and they're telling another person. Then you see them over here and they're saying it again. It's that type of person that probably isn't something weird or funny that we laugh at. It's actually some type of mental situation going on. But I know exactly what they're talking about, especially with being in prison. In prison, you see so many different personalities. It's just mind-boggling. So I definitely understand that. Now, when it comes to your whole body, you might black out, have dizziness, faint, or fatigue. Your mood would present anger, anxiety, and loneliness. Eyes would be raccoon eyes. Eyes would be dilated, vomiting, or diarrhea. That's gastrointestinal. With speech, it would be difficulty to speak or slurred. And visual, like we said, blurred vision or sensitivity to light. People with TBI, they might experience a rapid change in their mood, kind of like bipolar. But some of the people we always thought were bipolar, that's not exactly what it was. They had TBI the whole time and we didn't know it. They might also have an extreme emotional response to a situation. They might raise their voice, laugh, or cry. So, you know, some people you've seen that will just go ballistic over something simple that means nothing. You be like, man, what is wrong with you, man? Why are you acting like this over that? And so, you know, the whole time it was TBI. We didn't know it. Some people get very emotional and loud over things that mean nothing for real. So anyway, they're not really crazy. It's really something to do with TBI. Trust me. And then you got these people where you're talking with them and y'all are having a conversation back and forth and suddenly their voice skyrockets so high up in the air because they have an emotional response to the answer they're giving you or the dialogue y'all are in. They have an extremely emotional response and their voice just goes through the roof. So, I mean, that explains it. I understand that too. Researchers estimate up to 60% of prisoners are living with TBI inside of our prisons. And in prison, medical care is inadequate, especially mental health care. Many guys are not diagnosed properly. And something else about prison, when you go to see the psychiatrist in prison, I have had them hand me a list before. Here you go, Mr. Treadway. What do you want? And I would have to look at this list and tell them what I want. Pretty crazy, right? So how is that mental health? It's not. All it is that woman is coming in and making $80K a year, just doing nothing, basically. But that's how all DOC's entities are inside. You might have a couple prisons that operate properly, that they put on display with their little press releases, inmate programs, and all that stuff, but it's really not like that, trust me. Then everybody asks why. Why do so many people have TBI? What is it about getting hit in the head that is so significant that people acquire TBI? Well, just so you know, there's no definitive proof. There's no proof out there of any real reason, but there is a lot of sophisticated theories. One of these theories is that substance abuse might play a big part of it. There is a strong correlation between TBI and substance abuse for incarcerated individuals. Maybe TBI makes the odds of coming in contact with law enforcement higher. Who knows? That's what it seems like though. One study suggests that people with TBI are 25 times more likely to become incarcerated. And another study found that it might be more common for incarcerated individuals to have multiple TBIs. Not just a TBI, but multiple TBIs. It might be because TBI can affect one's ability to predict the consequences of his or her actions and make it difficult to control emotions. There's also the idea that risky behaviors can place people at a more higher risk of having TBI. Having a history of offenses prior to TBI is associated with post-TBI arrests. General risk factors are similar between those who have TBI and those who don't. Those arrested tend to be young, single, less educated males. Now, listen to this. This is the one that I like, that affects me, that is me. Okay? Individuals with TBI may experience disabilities that make prison life challenging and make the transition from the correction setting to the community setting more difficult. So they're saying, if you got TBI, it makes your prison life more dramatic, harder, not understanding everything the way you should. And when you get out, you don't transition properly from being in prison out into the free world. And that is true. I can attest to it because I definitely had PTSD. And when I first got out of prison, I would not even come out the house. I would not go in stores by myself, and I would not go out that front door at dark time. It was weird. Prison did something to me, and it's TBI. It's all them blows to my head. Additionally, staff in prison and community corrections often lack understanding of TBI and may unknowingly respond in ways that worsen TBI symptoms. This may reduce the ability of incarcerated individuals to conform to prison expectations and may limit their ability to benefit from programs and interventions. So right there, corrections officers can respond in ways that worsen us. See, the corrections officers don't understand why we're acting in a certain way. So they are looking at us like we're just misbehaving or we're doing something wrong, when the whole time we're having trouble conforming to their standards. And they don't understand it because they do not have the knowledge. But one state wanted to figure it out. So this is what they did. To address this, the Washington State Department of Corrections and the University of Washington formed a partnership in 2014. And boom, the TBI and Corrections Project was born. Yep, the TBI and Corrections Project. The project addresses the DOC's mission and vision of improving public safety and working together for safe communities through research-based TBI education and interventions that target frontline DOC staff. Incarcerated individuals with TBI, the TBI and Corrections team includes University of Washington researchers, a comprehensive group of DOC staff, including administrators, Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, frontline staff, and health and mental health classifications services. This group has worked hard to identify simple, effective ways to make the Washington State prisons safer. So it was a project, and it's come a long way since then. So it was kind of like an experiment, but with good cause. And it's come a long way since 2014. They've learned a lot. The payoff for all their hard work would come in 2019 when a program to develop a screening tool for incarcerated individuals with a history of TBI would begin in Washington State Prison. The goal of this project? Well, that's simple. To identify incarcerated individuals who would benefit from additional services or accommodations, and it would help DOC staff learn tangible ways to interact with inmates that have TBI. The expected and hoped for result would be to expand the program to all Washington State prisons, and that the services and interventions will help reduce infractions and maintain compliance. The thing is, having TBI can present challenges unique to the prison setting, like having difficulty understanding directions, appearing to be slow or non-responsive to staff requests, acting impulsively with staff or other inmates, having difficulty organizing a cell and personal belongings and keeping the cell clean, having rapid mood swings with no apparent reason, making a person more volatile in public spaces, responding too aggressively to staff or other inmates, having anxiety or depression and withdrawing from the social setting altogether, being more sensitive to lights and sounds, especially in common areas. And while TBI can cause a wide range of challenges in a correctional setting, there are some ways to help these individuals. You can talk to them slowly and pause when shifting between ideas or subjects. This will allow someone more time to process what you are saying. Also, you can use concrete examples and avoid using hypotheticals. The more complicated the information, the less that it will be understood. Break information into small chunks and repeat it over and over. It's easier to understand what one is saying when it is provided that way. Ask clarifying open-ended questions rather than yes or no questions. And to gauge a person's understanding, for an example, tell me what you understand will be more informative than do you understand. That makes sense, right? Use a calm and low voice. The louder the voice, the more difficult it is to understand for someone with sound sensitivity. Have more important conversations in a quiet, dimly lit area when it's available. Loud, bright spaces can make some individuals with TBI more agitated, and it can make it difficult for them to focus. To improve interactions between inmates and staff, it might increase safety in correctional settings. Inmates can work with their ADA compliance managers to discuss possible accommodations. Now, correctional staff might also have TBI and other occupations that they may have suffered blows to the head. A lot of correction staff have previous law enforcement or military backgrounds that have placed them at a high risk of having TBI. If you or someone you know works in such setting and are concerned about the effects of a prior TBI, there are a few things that you can do. Since many of the cognitive and behavioral associated with TBI are not unique to having TBI, proper diagnosis is a very important first step. If you do not have such a diagnosis, consult with your primary care physician and find a plan to move forward. If you already have a diagnosis, but you continue to struggle with TBI symptoms, you can contact a specialist, such as a psychiatrist or a neurologist. It's not a one-for-all type of injury. The severity level ranges so widely that treatment is unique to each individual. Some people can find coping strategies to compensate for areas of challenge while selecting activities and jobs that speak to the areas of strength. Others are not so lucky. Cognitive difficulties are typically evaluated by a neuropsychologist. If you find yourself feeling depressed or anxious, or if you're having issues controlling your emotions, you might benefit from seeing a psychologist that specializes or has a background in brain injury.
This silent epidemic also needs to be discussed in our prison population, where according to the CDC, studies report anywhere between 25 to 80% of inmates having experienced a head injury or TBI. Traumatic brain injury may be both a cause and effect of being incarcerated. These studies lead to the inescapable conclusion that all prisoners need to be screened for traumatic brain injury. Because prisons present many challenges for individuals with a brain injury, which may further complicate their period of incarceration. These challenges include difficulties understanding and following directions. Prison staff must be educated to these deficits and symptoms of a traumatic brain injury, and why rehabilitation rather than punishment is a more appropriate way of addressing these issues or problems. And community re-entry programs and re-entry staff should be trained to identify a history of traumatic brain injury and have access to appropriate consultation with other professionals with expertise in traumatic brain injury. The advice and recommendations of the Centers for Disease Control to support new research to develop better methods for identifying inmates with history of TBI and for determining how many incarcerated individuals are brain injury survivors needs to be heeded. Thank you for joining me this week. And I look forward to speaking with you again next week on another edition of the Brain Injury Insider.